The Deep Space Monitoring Station, Horizon's Edge, was supposed to be boring. That's what Commander Sarah Chen had been promised when she accepted the assignment. After 15 years of active combat duty in the Seoul Defense Force, she'd welcome the idea of quiet shifts watching the stars drift by in unexplored space. The alert that changed everything came during third shift, when most of the station's crew was asleep. A cascade of warnings lit up her neural interface, painting her vision with urgent crimson notifications. The quantum sensors had detected something massive and ancient, drifting through the void ahead. "Well," she muttered, fingers dancing across holographic controls. "So much for boring." The object was a beacon, one of thousands forming a massive three-dimensional grid stretching across several light years. Each one pulsed with energy signatures unlike anything in human databases, but the message they broadcast was clear enough. Danger. Turn back. The Dominion CLDM's this space. Sarah's second-in-command, Lieutenant Raj Patel, materialized beside her workstation, his dark eyes reflecting the holographic displays. "Those energy readings are impossible," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "The power source hasn't degraded in at least 50,000 years." 50,000 years, Sarah repeated, leaning back in her chair. "And they're still active." Someone really wanted to make sure their warning stuck around. The station's AI, joined the conversation through their neural links. "I've completed preliminary analysis of the beacon network. The technology suggests a civilization significantly more advanced than current human capabilities." However, the AI paused, something it rarely did. "The engineering appears remarkably rigid, unchanging, as if it reached a point of development and simply stopped." Sarah felt a smile tugging at her lips. In her experience, anything that claimed to be perfect usually had the biggest flaws. "Get me a secure link to Fleet Command, and wake up our xenorchiology team. I want to know everything about these beacons before." The space around them twisted. Reality itself seemed to fold, and suddenly they weren't alone. A ship had appeared. No, multiple ships. They emerged from what looked like tears in space-time itself, their hulls gleaming with an impossible metallic sheen that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Magnificent," Raj breathed. "They're not using any known form of FTL travel. They're literally bending space around themselves." The largest of the vessels was easily 20 kilometers long, its surface decorated with patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. It dwarfed Horizon's Edge, making the station feel like a toy in comparison. Sarah's neural interface crackled with an incoming transmission. The message arrived in perfect Earth standard, though they had never contacted this species before. "Attention, primitive vessel. You have entered space claimed by the Dominion. We are the perfected, the final form of evolutionary advancement. Your presence here is a violation of natural order. Prepare for evaluation." Sarah exchanged glances with Raj, both of them fighting to keep straight faces. In her decade and a half of service, she'd learned that any species claiming to be perfected usually had the most to learn. "Araya," she subvocalized through her neural link. "Are you recording this?" "Affirmative, Commander. And I've already noted 14 potential vulnerabilities in their approach vector and communication protocols." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The Dominion had made the classic mistake of assuming technological superiority meant total superiority. They hadn't even bothered to encrypt their transmission properly, broadcasting their arrogance across open channels. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth Exploration Station Horizon's Edge," she responded, keeping her tone carefully neutral. "We apologize for any territorial violation. We are a peaceful exploration mission." The response was immediate and dripping with condescension. "Your apology is noted, primitive. However, now that you have witnessed the Dominion, evaluation is mandatory. Prepare your station for inspection. Resistance would be." A pause, evolutionarily unsound. Sarah muted the transmission and turned to her crew, now all fully awake and at their stations. Their faces showed the same mix of amusement and anticipation she felt. Humanity had faced would-be conquerors before, and they'd learned something new from each encounter. "Well," she announced, "looks like we've got ourselves a first contact situation with some very evolved friends." The sarcasm in her voice drew knowing smiles from her crew. "Araya, activate the Infinity Protocol. Let's show our guests what primitive really means." As the massive Dominion ships drew closer, their sensors would detect nothing but a simple research station, its technology seemingly centuries behind their own. They wouldn't see the quantum computers woven into the station's very structure, or the dimensional pocket drives ready to tear holes in reality itself. They wouldn't notice the swarms of nanites already analyzing their hull composition, or the AI running combat simulations faster than thought. The Dominion was about to learn what every other superior species had discovered. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their weapons. It was their ability to adapt, to innovate, and most importantly, to surprise. "Raj," Sarah said, settling back into her command chair, "record a message for Fleet Command. Tell them." She paused, watching the approaching ships with a predator's smile. "Tell them we've made some new friends, and they think they're perfect." The Dominion inspection team materialized inside Horizon's Edge's main docking bay in a display of technological prowess that was clearly meant to impress. Their environmental suits seemed to flow like liquid mercury, adapting instantly to the station's atmosphere. Leading them was a being that stood nearly 3 meters tall, its form suggesting the merger of organic and mechanical perfection. Commander Chen watched the internal feeds with growing amusement as the inspection team moved through the station, their sensors probing every surface. They were looking right at humanity's most advanced technology and seeing exactly what humans wanted them to see: an unremarkable research station with decidedly primitive capabilities. "They're scanning the quantum core," Araya reported through the neural link. "Their sensors are interpreting it as a basic fusion reactor." "Fascinating," Raj muttered. "Their technology is so advanced they can't even conceive of something operating on different principles. They're seeing what they expect to see." The Dominion leader, who had introduced itself as Overseer X 742, finally reached the command center. Its voice resonated with harmonics that suggested multiple vocal processors working in concert. "Your technology is precisely as primitive as our initial scans indicated. This is unfortunate. The Dominion cannot allow lesser species to pollute space with inferior methods of operation." Sarah kept her expression neutral, though internally she was cataloging every detail of the Dominion's technology that ARIA's scans were revealing. "We understand your concern, Overseer. However, we're simply explorers seeking to learn from more advanced civilizations." "Learn." The Overseer's tone managed to convey both amusement and disdain. "You cannot learn perfection. The Dominion achieved the apex of evolution 10,000 years ago. We have not needed to change since. 10,000 years without change." Sarah allowed genuine curiosity to color her voice. "That must be comfortable." Something in her tone made the Overseer pause. For the first time, its sensors focused more intently on her. "You doubt the wisdom of perfection." "Not at all," Sarah replied smoothly. "I'm simply wondering why you stopped." The question hung in the air like a challenge. The Overseer's form shifted slightly, its liquid metal surface rippling in what might have been agitation. "Stopped. We achieved perfection. There is nowhere else to go." Sarah stood from her command chair, approaching the towering figure with casual confidence. "There's always somewhere else to go. That's what makes the universe interesting." "Your primitive philosophy is noted," the Overseer declared. "However, it changes nothing. The Dominion has determined that your species requires guidance. You will submit to our authority, and we will elevate you to a more suitable form of existence." Sarah's smile widened just slightly. "And if we decline?" "Decline?" The Overseer seemed genuinely confused by the concept. "You misunderstand. This is not an offer. It is evolutionary inevitability. About that, Sarah said, nodding to Raj. Araya, show our guests what they've actually been looking at. The air around them shimmered as the station's true nature was revealed. Quantum interfaces sprang to life, dimensional generators hummed with power, and the primitive control panels transformed into advanced holographic workstations that made the Dominion's technology look positively archaic. The Overseer stumbled back, its perfect form suddenly uncertain. This is impossible. Our scans saw exactly what we wanted them to see, Sarah finished. You've been scanning our technology through a filter of your own assumptions. You saw primitive technology because you couldn't conceive of anything different from your own perfect systems. You deceived us. The concept seemed to physically pain the Overseer. We adapted, Sarah corrected. Something you might want to try sometime. Araya, show them what else they missed. The AI projected a detailed analysis of Dominion technology, including several critical vulnerabilities that their perfect systems had never considered. While you were inspecting our primitive station, Sarah explained, we were learning everything about your supposedly superior technology. Would you like to see how many ways we could have disabled your ships in the last hour? The Overseer's perfect form seemed to waver, its liquid metal surface showing distinct signs of distress. This changes nothing. The Dominion has the power to. To what? Sarah interrupted. To force us to be more like you. To stop changing. To stop exploring new possibilities. She gestured around the command center. Look around you, Overseer. While you've been standing still for 10,000 years, we've been moving forward. And we're not about to stop because someone else thinks they've found perfection. The Overseer's next words came slower, with less certainty. The Dominion will not tolerate. The Dominion, Sarah said firmly, needs to understand something. Humanity doesn't seek perfection. We seek improvement, growth, change. And if you try to force us to stop, she let the threat hang unspoken. As if to emphasize her point, the station's quantum core pulsed, sending ripples through space-time that made the Dominion's advanced sensors scream in confusion. They couldn't understand how a primitive species had mastered technology that operated on principles they'd never even considered. The Overseer turned to its inspection team, their perfect forms now showing distinct signs of agitation. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Dominion faced something they couldn't categorize, couldn't predict, and couldn't control. Consider this a counteroffer, Sarah said quietly. Instead of trying to force us to adapt to your way of thinking, perhaps you should consider adapting to ours. After all, she smiled, that's how evolution is supposed to work. The Dominion inspection team left Horizon's Edge in a state of evident confusion, their perfect certainty shaken to its core. As their ships disappeared back into their space-time rifts, Sarah turned to her crew. ARIA, send everything we learned to Fleet Command. I have a feeling the Dominion isn't going to take this lesson lying down. Already done, Commander, the AI replied. Should I begin preparations for their likely return? Sarah looked out at the stars, her expression thoughtful. No, let's prepare for something they'll never expect. After all, that's what we do best. The game had begun, and humanity had just shown its first hand. The Dominion would return, of that she was certain. But they would find that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in achieving perfection. It was in never stopping long enough to think they had. 3 weeks after the Horizon's Edge incident, the Dominion launched what they considered a perfect attack. Their war fleets emerged simultaneously across 12 different sectors of human space, expecting to find a primitive civilization scrambling to mount a defense. Instead, they found emptiness. In the command center of the Earth Defense Force flagship Prometheus, Admiral James Zhang watched the Dominion's confusion with quiet satisfaction. Beside him, a holographic representation of Commander Chen flickered to life. They took the bait, Sarah reported. All 12 assault fleets are exactly where we predicted they'd be. Of course they are, Zhang replied, his weathered face creasing with amusement. The problem with perfection is it makes you predictable. The Dominion had spent 3 weeks analyzing their encounter at Horizon's Edge, devising what they believed was the optimal strategy to subjugate humanity. Their tactical computers had run billions of simulations, all based on their understanding of primitive human capabilities. Not once had they considered that humanity had shown them exactly what they wanted to see. Operation Echo is proceeding as planned. Araya's voice announced across the neural network linking the human fleet. Dominion command and control systems are attempting to compensate for phantom sensor readings. They still believe they are engaging our main fleet. In reality, the massive battles the Dominion sensors detected were elaborate quantum holograms, powered by technology they had dismissed as impossible. While their perfect warships fought shadows, the real human fleet was executing a far more subtle strategy. Status of the infiltration teams? Zhang asked, his eyes tracking multiple tactical displays simultaneously. Team Alpha through Delta report successful penetration of Dominion computational networks. Araya responded. Their security algorithms are remarkably static. They haven't updated them since achieving perfection. Sarah's hologram smiled. They're starting to realize something's wrong. The overseer who inspected my station is personally leading one of the assault fleets, and their communications suggest they're growing frustrated. Frustrated is good. Zhang nodded. Frustrated means they'll make mistakes. Araya, initiate Phase 2. Across human space, thousands of quantum beacons activated simultaneously. Each one began broadcasting on frequencies the Dominion had thought impossible to utilize, creating a cascading wave of interference that their perfect sensors couldn't filter out. Their fleets, suddenly blind, began to break formation. Interesting, Araya observed. Their ships are attempting to compensate by reverting to predetermined backup protocols. They literally cannot adapt to unexpected situations. That's what happens when you stop evolving, Sarah said. You forget how. The human strategy hadn't been to match the Dominion's military might. Instead, they had spent 3 weeks studying how their enemies thought, how they fought, and most importantly, how they had stopped changing. The Dominion's perfection was their greatest weakness. They had optimized themselves into a corner. Their command structure is experiencing cascade failures, Araya reported. Infiltration teams report their leadership is attempting to force reality to match their simulations rather than adapting to new data. Zhang allowed himself a small smile. Now, Commander Chen, if you would do the honors. Sarah's hologram nodded, and across human space, reality itself seemed to shift. The quantum holograms that had kept the Dominion fleets occupied suddenly transformed, revealing their true nature. But instead of disappearing, they began to interact with Dominion systems in ways their perfect technology had never been designed to handle. They're trying to retreat, Sarah reported, watching the chaos unfold. But their space-time drives are interpreting our quantum interference as navigational data. They can't plot a safe course back. They can't even shut down their systems, Araya added. Their pursuit of perfection led them to remove all manual overrides. Every system must operate at optimal efficiency at all times. The Dominion fleets, their perfect formation shattered, began to drift in space. Their crews, trained only to execute flawless, predetermined strategies, had no protocols for this situation. They had never needed them before. Open a channel to all Dominion vessels, Zhang ordered. Let's see if they're ready to learn something new. The communication that reached the Dominion ships wasn't a demand for surrender or a threat. Instead, it was an offer of assistance, a detailed explanation of how they could safely disengage their drives and return home. It was, in essence, a lesson in adaptation. This is Admiral Zhang of the Earth Defense Force, he broadcast. We understand you're experiencing some technical difficulties. We're transmitting procedures that will help you restore control of your vessels. Consider this a demonstration of why evolution never truly ends. The response came from the Overseer's flagship, its perfect harmonics now distorted with uncertainty. You planned this from the beginning. The inspection. The primitive technology. All of it. We showed you what you expected to see, Zhang replied. And while you spent 3 weeks preparing a perfect attack against an enemy that didn't exist, we spent that time learning how to turn your perfection against you. For several long moments, silence filled the void. Then, one by one, Dominion ships began implementing the human protocols, their crews forced to manually override systems that hadn't been touched in thousands of years. They're learning, Sarah observed. Some of them, anyway. Evolution in action, Zhang agreed. Araya, maintain surveillance but allow them to withdraw. I think they need some time to process this lesson. As the Dominion fleets limped back to their territory, Zhang turned to Sarah's hologram. Think they'll be back? Oh, definitely, she replied. But next time, they'll have to choose between holding on to their perfection or learning to change. And that, she smiled, will be the real test. The battle had been won without a single shot fired, using weapons the Dominion hadn't even recognized as weapons. But the war wasn't over. Humanity had thrown down a challenge that struck at the very core of Dominion society. The question of whether perfection was worth the price of stagnation. The message that arrived at Earth Defense Command was unlike anything the Dominion had sent before. Gone were the harmonics of perfection, replaced by something almost unthinkable: uncertainty. We request dialogue. The transmission began, the pause itself a crack in their perfect facade. The Overseer Prime wishes to understand. Admiral Zhang sat in his private quarters aboard the Prometheus, sharing a virtual conference with Commander Chen and the heads of Earth's scientific divisions. The holographic participants flickered with subtle quantum distortions, a reminder that human technology had already surpassed what the Dominion considered possible. They're scared, Dr. Maya Patel, head of Tenopsychology, observed. Their entire society is built on the idea of achieved perfection. We didn't just defeat their military strategy, we challenged their fundamental belief system. Good, Sarah said. Fear means growth. Growth means change. And change, Zhang added, is what they need most. He turned to address the assembled holograms. The question is, do we show them everything now? The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Humanity's true technological capabilities had remained hidden, masked behind layers of quantum deception. What the Dominion had seen, what had so thoroughly defeated them, was merely the surface. Araya, Zhang called. Analysis. The A's response was immediate. The Dominion's social structure is experiencing unprecedented instability. Their encounter with us has created the first philosophical schism in their society in over 10,000 years. Multiple factions have emerged. Those who wish to learn from humanity, those who demand immediate military action to preserve their perfection, and those who have begun questioning the very concept of perfection itself. A civilization in crisis, Dr. Patel mused. The perfect moment for revelation. Zhang nodded slowly. Commander Chen, I believe it's time for Operation Mirror. Show them what they've really been fighting against. Sarah's hologram smiled. With pleasure, Admiral. Across human space, massive quantum arrays began to power up. These weren't weapons. They were windows designed to show the Dominion a truth they had never considered possible. The Overseer Prime's delegation arrived at a neutral location, a space station constructed specifically for this meeting. Their perfect forms still gleamed with liquid metal brilliance, but there was a hesitation in their movements now, an uncertainty that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. Sarah Chen, now promoted to captain, stood beside Admiral Zhang as the Dominion representatives entered the conference chamber. The room itself was deliberately austere, containing nothing that would register as technology to Dominion sensors. Welcome, Zhang said simply. We appreciate your willingness to dialogue. The Overseer Prime, a being that towered over its fellows, spoke with carefully measured tones. We have questions. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that should not be possible. Our simulations cannot explain your methods. That's because you're trying to understand us through the lens of perfection. Sarah replied. But we never sought perfection. We sought something else entirely. With a subtle gesture, she activated the quantum arrays. The space around them transformed, revealing the true nature of human technology. It wasn't the rigid, predictable systems the Dominion had mastered. Instead, it was something organic, evolving, alive with possibilities. This, Zhang explained, is what adaptation looks like. Our technology doesn't seek to achieve a perfect state. It seeks to constantly change, to grow, to become something new. The Overseer Prime's perfect form wavered, its liquid metal surface reflecting chaotic patterns. But this defies all logical progression. Your systems, they're imperfect, Sarah finished. Deliberately so, because imperfection leaves room for improvement. Your technology reached its apex and stopped. Ours never stops evolving. The quantum arrays showed them everything. Ships that could rewrite their own physical laws, AI systems that evolved faster than thought, and technologies that deliberately introduced random elements to spark new innovations. Your society achieved what you considered perfection. Dr. Patil added, her hologram joining the conversation. But in doing so, you removed the most crucial element of true advancement, the ability to question, to doubt, to wonder if there might be a better way. The Dominion delegation watched in silence as human technology demonstrated possibilities their perfect systems had never imagined. Their sensors, designed to categorize and quantify everything they encountered, simply couldn't process what they were seeing. Your attack fleets weren't defeated by superior firepower, Zhang explained. They were defeated by their own inability to comprehend something that didn't fit their perfect models. And now, Sarah continued, you have a choice to make. You can retreat back to your perfection, seal yourselves off from a universe that doesn't fit your models, or you can remember how to change. The Overseer Prime's next words came slowly, each one seeming to cost tremendous effort. How? How do we begin? Sarah smiled, and for the first time, there was genuine warmth in her expression. You already have. By coming here, by asking questions, by admitting uncertainty, you've taken the first step away from perfection and toward something far more valuable. Growth. The quantum arrays shifted again, showing the Dominion delegation something new, a vision of what their civilization could become if they remembered how to evolve. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't flawless, but it was alive with possibilities they had forgotten existed. This isn't a demand for surrender, Zhang said quietly. It's an invitation to join us in exploring what comes after perfection. The Overseer Prime stood silent for a long moment, its perfect form showing more emotion than any human had yet seen from their species. When it finally spoke, its voice carried the weight of a civilization on the brink of transformation. We would learn from you. 1 year after the Dominion's request for dialogue, Horizon's Edge Station hosted a gathering unprecedented in galactic history. The station had been transformed, its quantum architecture now openly displayed rather than hidden. But more remarkable than the technology were the changes in their visitors. The Dominion delegation no longer moved with the rigid precision of perfection. Their liquid metal forms shifted and flowed with new patterns, expressing emotions they had suppressed for millennia. Some had even begun experimenting with organic shapes, abandoning the symmetrical forms that had once been their standard. Captain Sarah Chen stood at her familiar command station, watching as Overseer Prime, now calling itself Explorer Prime, engaged in animated discussion with Earth's leading scientists. The being's perfect harmonics had given way to a voice that occasionally cracked with excitement or uncertainty. Remarkable progress, Admiral Zhang observed, stepping up beside her. Dr. Patel's latest report suggests their society is experiencing a renaissance of sorts. They're remembering how to dream, Sarah replied. That's worth more than any technology we could have shared. The past year had seen changes that would have once been unthinkable. The Dominion, after 10,000 years of stasis, had begun to evolve again. Not all at once, and not without resistance. Change never came easily to those who had embraced perfection for so long. "RIA," Sarah called. "Show us the progress report." The AI projected a series of images showing the transformation of Dominion space. Their once uniform cities now displayed variety and experimentation. Their ships, previously identical in their perfection, had begun to show individual modifications and improvements. But most significantly, their young were being taught to question rather than simply accept. "There are still holdouts," Zhang noted, gesturing to a sector of space where traditionalist Dominion factions maintained their pursuit of perfection. Some refused to abandon the old ways. As they should, a new voice joined their conversation. Explorer Prime approached, its form rippling with what humans had learned to recognize as thoughtful consideration. "We now understand that true evolution requires diversity, even the diversity of those who resist change." Sarah smiled at the irony. "They're providing the contrast that makes growth possible." Indeed, Explorer Prime's form shifted, expressing what might have been amusement. "We thought ourselves the pinnacle of evolution, yet we had forgotten evolution's most basic principle. Adaptation requires variation." The station's quantum sensors detected a new arrival, a Dominion ship unlike any they'd seen before. Its design incorporated both their traditional perfect symmetry and new experimental features that would have been heretical a year ago. It was neither perfect nor chaotic, but something in between, something new. "Our first joint venture," Explorer Prime explained, "a ship designed to explore not just space, but possibilities. Its systems are deliberately imperfect, with room for growth and modification built into every component." Zhang studied the vessel with professional appreciation. "You've come a long way from demanding our submission to evolutionary inevitability." "Ah yes," Explorer Prime's form rippled with what humans now recognize as embarrassment. "We were so certain of our superiority that we couldn't see our own stagnation. You could have destroyed us, you know. Our perfect systems were helpless against your adaptive technology." "Destruction is easy," Sarah said, shaking her head. "Change, real change, that's the harder path, and usually the more rewarding one." Around them, the station hummed with activity as human and Dominion scientists collaborated on projects that would have been impossible a year ago. Their different approaches to technology and evolution had created something greater than either could have achieved alone. "We still receive regular messages from your traditionalist factions," Sarah mentioned. "They insist we're corrupting the perfect order of your society." Explorer Prime's form vibrated in what had become their version of laughter. "They don't realize that their resistance itself is a form of evolution. For the first time in 10,000 years, our society contains genuine debate, genuine disagreement. It's wonderfully imperfect." The quantum arrays activated one final time, displaying a map of known space. Scattered throughout were points of light representing joint human-Dominion exploration missions, each one pushing the boundaries of what both species thought possible. "We had a saying on Earth," Zhang offered. "The journey is more important than the destination." "Yes," Explorer Prime agreed, its form shifting through a range of experimental patterns. "We thought we had reached our destination, perfect evolution. But you showed us that the true destination is the journey itself." Sarah looked out at the stars, thinking of that first encounter when the Dominion had demanded humanity's submission. "You know what the funny thing is? You were right about one thing. Evolution is inevitable. You just had the wrong idea about what that meant." Indeed, Explorer Prime's form settled into a new configuration, one that balanced symmetry with spontaneity. "We thought evolution meant reaching perfection. You showed us it means never stopping, never settling, always reaching for what comes next." As if to emphasize the point, the experimental ship outside began to change, its surfaces rippling with new patterns as its systems adapted to data from its first flight. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. And that was exactly what made it remarkable. "So," Sarah asked, "where do we go from here?" Explorer Prime's response carried a note of joy that would have been impossible a year ago. Everywhere, anywhere, into the unknown, into the imperfect, into the possible. After all, its form rippled with genuine amusement. That's what evolution is all about. The stars stretched out before them, infinite in their possibilities. Humanity had faced the perfect enemy and shown them a greater truth, that perfection was the enemy of progress. The Dominion had sought to perfect evolution, and in doing so had nearly stopped evolving altogether. But with humanity's help, they had remembered how to change, how to grow, how to laugh at their own certainties. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, other species waited to be discovered, other lessons to be learned. For in the end, the greatest victory wasn't in achieving perfection, it was in never stopping long enough to think you had.